The office at the back of the bank was smaller than a jail cell and quieter than a chapel. There was one desk, 2 chairs, and a monitor turned away from me. A woman named Yvette Cardona sat on the other side of it, and she turned the screen toward me the way a doctor turns over a scan, slowly so it would not land all at once. She pointed at a single line near the bottom. 1 wire, $46,000. Frozen. She said, "This distribution form carries your signature, ma'am. It does not match the signature card we have on file. I spent 11 years of my life signing for other people's money, for fuel and payroll and travel vouchers, for the exact things the Army trusts a finance officer to keep honest. I never once imagined I would sit in a chair and have to prove that my own name, in my own hand, was a lie." Yvette Cardona looked at me with steady, patient eyes and asked the question that would take the next 3 months of my life to answer. She said, "Do you recognize the hand that wrote your name here? But let me back up a little. 11 months is long enough for a child to forget the weight of you." That was the thing nobody warned me about. Across 3 deployments, across all the training, they tell you about the heat and the boredom and the calls that drop at the worst second. They do not tell you that your son will grow 2 inches and learn to tie his own shoes and stop needing the nightlight, and that you will miss every single one of those small graduations. So when I came down the jet bridge that August with my duffel cutting into my shoulder, the only thing I wanted in the entire world was already standing at the bottom of it. Owen saw me first. He was 8, and he was taller, and he ran the way children run when they have been holding still too long. Etta was 6 and shyer. She hid behind her brother for 1 second, deciding whether I was really me, and then she decided, and she came too. For the first time in 11 months, both of my children were in my arms at once. I did not cry. I had trained myself out of crying in public a long time ago, but I held on longer than I needed to, and I memorized the exact way they smelled, because I had learned the hard way that the memory fades faster than you think. Neil was standing a few feet back. My husband? He had a way of hanging at the edge of a moment, letting it happen to other people first, then stepping in once it was safe. He hugged me, and it was a good hug, and it was a beat too short. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself 11 months does strange things to the way you read a person. "You look tired," he said, and he took my duffel, and that was kind, and I let the small, cold feeling go. The drive home was ordinary in the way you dream about when you are far away. Owen narrated the entire school year from the back seat without pausing to breathe. There had been a science fair. He had built a small machine that sorted coins by size, and it had almost worked, and the boy who beat him had used a kit, which Owen considered cheating and mentioned 4 separate times. Etta held my hand across the middle seat and said almost nothing, and every few minutes she squeezed once, just to confirm I had not evaporated. I squeezed back every time. It became a small private code between us, all the way home. The house was the house, and it was also very slightly not. Someone had rearranged the kitchen while I was gone. The mugs were in a different cabinet. The spices were in alphabetical order, which I had never once done in my life. I knew whose hand that was before anyone told me. Priscilla had helped. She helped the way weather helps, thoroughly and without asking, leaving everything a little more the way she preferred it, and a little less the way you left it. I want to be fair to the man Neil was before all of this, because the story does not make sense otherwise. He was not a monster. He was the husband who stayed behind. Through 3 deployments, he had handled the house, the mortgage, the pediatrician, the leaking water heater, the 1,000 small emergencies that do not pause because a wife is overseas. I had built my entire adult life on being the one who could be trusted with a budget, and he had built ours on being the one who could be trusted with the day. It was a fair trade for a long time. When you are gone as much as I was gone, you learn to hand things over. You have to. The alternative is to control nothing and lose your mind trying to control it anyway from the other side of the planet. Here's the part I have thought about most. I was the money person. That was my whole professional identity. I could reconcile a battalion's accounts in my sleep, find the one transaction out of 10,000 that did not belong, brief a colonel on where every dollar went. And at home, I had handed the checkbook to my husband and never looked back, because looking back felt like distrust, and distrust felt like a failure of the trade we had made. I trusted the family with the family money. It is the one place in my life I did not keep the record, and it is the one place I got robbed. I want to tell you about the last morning before I left, because it is the morning I keep coming back to. We stood in the driveway before dawn, the kids still asleep inside, my bag already in the car. I was going over the list I always went over, the pediatrician's number, the mortgage auto pay, the code for the water heater. And I stopped, and I said the one thing that was not really on the list. I said, whatever happens, do not touch the kids' fund. That one is theirs. If money gets tight, we sell things, we borrow, we call my brother, we do anything else first. That account does not move. And Neil looked me in the eye in the dark, and he took both my hands, and he said, I would never. That is their whole future. I would never touch it. I believed him completely. I got on a plane on the strength of that sentence. I flew to the other side of the world and did my job for 11 months with my heart resting on those 4 words, I would never touch it. He said them while he was already, I think, half deciding to. That is the sentence I cannot get out of my head. Not the empty account. The promise in the driveway. His mother was another matter entirely. Priscilla Rourke had never once called me by my rank without making it sound like a costume she was tired of seeing me wear. She was 63, sharp as a filing cabinet, and she had firm opinions about everything a woman should be, most of which I was not. The first time I deployed, she told Neil, in a voice she did not bother to lower, that the Army was a phase, and I would grow out of it once I had real responsibilities. 14 years later, I was a major, and she still said the word phase now and then, just to keep it in the air, the way you keep a pilot light lit. There was a sister, too. Gwen, Neil's younger sister, 34, who orbited Priscilla the way a small moon orbits a large planet, close and locked. Gwen was not cruel. Gwen was compliant, which in the end did more damage than cruelty could have. When her mother asked her to sign something, she signed it. That is most of what you need to know about Gwen, and all of it will matter later. That first night home, we sat around the kitchen table, and it felt almost normal. Owen wanted to tell me about the science fair again, with new details. Etta wanted to sit in my lap and did not want to talk about anything. Priscilla had come over to help, which by now meant she had reorganized the pantry too, and disapproved of the brand of coffee I drink. At some point, the subject of the fall drifted up. School clothes and shoes, and the small avalanche of expenses that comes with 2 growing children, and I said, half to myself, that I had put money aside during the deployment and wanted to add it to the college fund. Priscilla set down her cup. You worry about the war, she said. Let the family worry about the money. It was the kind of thing she said all the time. I let it go, the way I had let 100 versions of it go over the years. That is the part I have had to forgive myself for. I was so tired and so glad to be home and so ready for everything to be fine that I did not hear the sentence underneath the sentence. Let the family worry about the money. It was not a courtesy. It was a status report. I should have heard it. I was too tired and too happy to listen. The college fund was a 529 savings account, and I want to explain what it meant, because a number on a screen does not carry the weight of the thing itself. I opened it the week Owen was born, in the hospital, on my phone, $20 while he slept on my chest, and the monitors beeped in the hall. I added to it the way other people add to a garden, a little at a time, over years. Birthday money, tax refunds, the extra pay from every deployment, which is the cruelest kind of money because you earn it by being gone from the very children you are saving it for. By the time I shipped out that last September, the balance was $46,000. Not a fortune, but it was 8 years of small, stubborn choices. It was the one promise I had made to 2 kids that felt airtight. Whatever else the Army took from them, and it took plenty, it would not take their future. I logged in 3 days after I got home. I wanted to add the deployment savings, close the loop, feel the number climb the way it always did. I remember the exact moment because I remember thinking the page had not loaded correctly. The balance read $11, not $46,000, not $4,000, $11 and no cents. I refreshed the page. $11. I logged out and logged back in because that is what a person does when a machine tells them something impossible. $11. My hands were very calm. I have noticed that about myself in the worst moments. My hands go calm, and my mind goes very fast and very cold, and a voice that the Army spent years installing takes over and says, do not react, observe, collect, confirm, and above all, do not tip the other side that you have seen what you have seen. I broke that last rule almost at once, because he was my husband, and some habits are older than any training. I called Neil into the room. I turned the screen so he could see it. I did not raise my voice. I said, the college fund is empty. There should be $46,000 in this account. It says 11. He did not look surprised. That was the first thing that told me. A man who is surprised looks at the screen. Neil looked at me. The kids don't need it yet, he said. I invested it. You invested it, I repeated. It's earning more where it is now. You were deployed. Someone had to manage the money. Where is it, Neil? If it's invested, then it's somewhere. Show me the somewhere. He did the thing he does, which is to make his face patient, as if I were the one being difficult. It's handled, he said. You just got home. You don't need to worry about this the first week back." Priscilla had appeared in the doorway the way she appeared everywhere, without a sound, already in the middle of an opinion. She folded her arms. "She comes home," she said, to the room, to no one, and the first thing she does is audit her own husband. "She's ungrateful," she added, a moment later, in case the point had not landed. I looked at the two of them, standing together in the doorway of my house, a matched set. "I want to tell you I said something devastating." I did not. I said, "Okay." I said it the way you say it when a plan has just changed and you are already 3 steps into the new one. Because a different voice, the one the Army spent 14 years training, had taken the controls, and it was not interested in winning the argument in that kitchen. It was interested in something much slower and much harder to stop. I went into the bedroom and I closed the door, and I did the only thing that mattered. I took out my phone and I photographed the screen, the balance, the last statement I could pull, the transaction history, what little of it the app would show me. I did not know yet exactly what I was looking at. But I knew the first rule of every investigation I had ever supported, which is that the record is the only thing that does not change its story later. People change their stories. Documents do not. Another voice, the calm one, told me to stop talking and start saving evidence. I tried once more that night to do it the ordinary way. I found Neil in the garage and I closed the door behind me so the kids would not hear. And I said, quietly, "I am going to ask you one time, and I want you to tell me the truth, because I can help you fix almost anything if you tell me the truth now. Where is the money?" For half a second, something flickered in him. I think, if I am generous, that half a second was the last exit ramp, and he saw it, and he did not take it. "You always have to be in charge of everything," he said. "Can't you just let something be handled?" That was his answer. That was the whole answer. I went back inside. That night I lay awake next to a man whose breathing I had missed for 11 months, and I did not feel married. I felt like a witness at the scene of something that had not finished happening yet. The next morning I did not call a lawyer. I called the bank. The bank sent me to a branch 2 towns over, to the small office at the back, to Yvette Cardona. She had a title that took a while to say. She worked in the fraud unit for the company that administered the college savings plan, and it turned out she had been half expecting a call about this account for 6 months. She did not know it would be me. She thought it might be a lawyer, or the police, or no one at all. Most of the time, she told me later, it is no one at all, and the frozen money just sits there until it is claimed or forgotten. "Before you say anything," she said, "I want to show you something, because I think you may have been told the wrong story about what happened here." She turned the monitor. She pointed at the line. 1 wire, $46,000. Status, frozen. The money did not disappear, she said. A large distribution left the plan in February. $46,000, a full non-qualified withdrawal, which means somebody took it out for something other than education and accepted the tax penalty to do it. That alone gets a second look from us, because people do not usually pay a penalty to empty a college account unless they are in a hurry. But this one did something else. The instruction was to roll the funds into a newly opened outside account, and that receiving account tripped a second review. So we held the wire. It has been sitting frozen since the 11th of February, waiting for someone to come and ask the right question. I did the arithmetic that every deployed parent does automatically. February, I had been 8,000 miles away in February. "Walk me through how a withdrawal like that is even possible," I said. "I am the account owner. How does the money move without me?" "It should not," she said. "That is the point. A distribution this size requires the account owner's signature on a form, and for a transfer to an outside account, it also requires a signature guarantee, what people sometimes call a medallion stamp. A guarantor, usually a bank officer, puts a stamp on the form that vouches that the signature is genuine. It is a serious thing. Guarantors are personally liable if they stamp a forgery." She brought up the form on the screen. "Here is your distribution form. Here is the guarantee stamp. And here," she said. And her voice did not change at all, which somehow made it worse. "Is the signature." My name was on it. It was even close. Someone had studied the way I write, the loop I put on the R, the way I do not lift the pen between the first 2 letters. It was close enough to fool a person glancing at it. It was not close enough to fool the machine. Large distributions get an automatic signature match against the card we took when the account was opened, Yvette Cardona said. This one failed. It did not fail by a little. She put the two side by side, the real one from 8 years ago and the one from February, and even I could see it, and I had written one of them with my own hand. So I froze the outbound wire, and I filed a suspicious activity report the same day, and I flagged the guarantee for review. Because if the signature is forged, then the guarantor either did not look or was lied to. And then I waited to see who would come asking why their money was stuck. She looked at me. You are the first person who has walked through that door in 6 months. Nobody called, nobody wrote. The other party just waited for the freeze to time out. It does not time out. That is a thing people assume. It does not. How does a person even get the guarantee stamp on a forged form? I asked. You said the guarantor is personally liable. Why would anyone risk that? They usually would not if they knew, Cardona said. So the guarantor gets lied to. Someone walks in with a form already filled out, presents identification, and signs in front of the officer, and the officer stamps it because the signing looked real to them in the moment. My guess, and it is only a guess until the records come out, is that whoever presented this form did not present it as yours to sign. They presented it as something they had the right to sign, and the guarantor took them at their word because most people are honest and guarantors are not handwriting examiners. The stamp does not prove the signature is real. It only proves someone stood at a desk and vouched for it. The signature card is the thing that catches the lie later in the back office where I sit. And it did. She let me look at the frozen line a while longer. I think she understood that I needed to see it. The money, sitting there, whole, before I could believe any of the rest. I will tell you something I do not tell most people who sit in that chair, she said. You almost did not find this. If you had gone straight to a divorce lawyer and started fighting about the house, this freeze would still be sitting here in the dark, and eventually the account would have been closed out through some other process, and the trail would have gotten colder every month. The reason you have a case is that your first instinct when a machine told you something impossible was to come to the machine and ask it what happened. Most people go to war with a person. You came and read the record. That is why you are going to win. I looked at the form again. The date at the top, the 11th of February. Where were you on the 11th of February? She asked. It was not an accusation. It was a professional pulling a thread, checking whether it held. Kuwait, I said. I can prove it to the hour. There is a manifest with my name on it and a seal on the manifest. Something in her face settled, the way a person's face settles when the numbers finally reconcile. Then I am going to tell you what I could not tell you until you said that, she said. The receiving account, the one this was being rolled into. It is a trust. It was opened in January. And the trustee is not you, and it is not the children. The money I had spent 3 days grieving had never left the building. It had been sitting frozen for 6 months, waiting for someone to ask the right question, and I had almost not asked it. I had almost called a divorce lawyer and started fighting about who kept the couch, and the money would have sat there in the dark while I fought the wrong war. For the first time since the airport, I was not tired anymore. I found a lawyer named Deborah Kastner because a woman in my unit had used her for a custody case and said she did not flinch. She was 49, and she had the specific calm of a person who has watched families come apart on schedule for 20 years and has stopped being shocked by any of it. I laid the photographs and the printouts on her desk, and I told the story in order, the way I would brief a commander, start to finish, no editorializing, and she listened without interrupting, which almost made me cry more than anything else had. People kept doing that through this whole thing. They kept simply believing me, and every time it undid me a little because I had spent a week being told by my own husband that I was the problem for asking. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, then she said, "People fight about money all the time. He spent it, she spent it, who bought the boat, who drained the savings. It is the most common fight there is, and it is usually a swearing contest, with no referee and no evidence. 2 people remembering the same marriage differently." She tapped the February form. This is not that. Almost no one is careless enough to forge a signature on a federally registered plan distribution and then write the date at the top of the page and route it to a trust that has a paper trail back to their own mother. He did not just spend the money, he created documents. Documents are what we win with. So what do we actually do with it? I asked. We do not try to prove he is a bad husband, she said. Judges have seen 10,000 bad husbands and they are bored of the entire species. We prove one narrow thing, and we prove it so cleanly that there is nothing to argue about. We prove you were on a plane. Everything else falls out of that single fact. If you did not sign the form, then someone else did, and there are only so many people with access to your account, your signature to copy, and a reason to move the money somewhere you could not reach. Once you were provably in another hemisphere, the question stops being, he said, she said, and becomes, then who signed this? And that question has a short list of answers, and every name on that list is a Rourke. His mother, I said, Priscilla, and maybe his sister. Gwen signs whatever Priscilla puts in front of her. Kastner wrote both names down. Tell me about the receiving trust, she said. Cardona froze the wire before it landed, so, on paper, the trust never actually got the money. That is good for the money and bad for their nerves, which is also good for us. A plan that fails is more dangerous to the planners than a plan that succeeds, because now there is a frozen wire and a report and a trail and no $46,000 to show for the risk. They are exposed and they got nothing. That makes people careless. Careless people talk. I do not have the trust documents yet, I said. Cardona could not hand me those. She said they would come out in the process. They will, Kastner said. I will subpoena them. Get me your orders, certified from your command with the movement manifest attached. I want a document with a government seal on it that says where your body was on the 11th of February. That is the whole case. That is the plane. Everything I do from here hangs off that one piece of paper. On the way out of her office that first day, Kastner said one more thing, and it stayed with me the whole way through. This is going to be lonely, she said. You are going to want to explain yourself to people who already decided you are the difficult one. Do not. Explain yourself to the court and to no one else. Save your voice for the room where it counts. She was right. The hardest weeks were not the legal ones. They were the ordinary ones. The school pickups where other parents had clearly heard a version of the story in which I was the wife who came home and dragged her husband into court over money. I let them think it. I stopped defending myself in grocery store aisles and text threads, and at the edges of soccer practice. I put everything I had into the file, and I let the file be my argument. It is a strange kind of discipline, letting people be wrong about you on purpose, trusting that the truth will arrive on its own schedule and not a second before. The Army had trained me for a lot of things. It had not quite trained me for that. I learned it anyway. I wrote to my former commander that night. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thibault had run the finance detachment I deployed with, and he was the kind of officer who answered email at strange hours and remembered the names of everyone's children. I asked him for certified copies of my orders and the movement manifest, and I told him briefly, without drama, why. He wrote back in under an hour. All it said was, whatever you need, and the character letters already written and sitting in my drafts. Get them, Delia, and then go quiet and let it work. I had spent a whole career keeping other people's paperwork honest, closing other people's findings, signing off on other people's clean audits. Now my own paperwork would have to save my children. I stopped grieving the marriage that week. I started building the file. The process moves slower than your heart wants it to and faster than the other side expects. Kastner subpoenaed the plan records and the receiving account documents, and about 2 weeks later, we sat in her office with the whole shape of it laid out on the table, and it was worse and cleaner than I had let myself imagine. The money had been rolled towards something called the Rourke Family Education Trust. It had been created in January, 3 weeks before the February withdrawal. I read the trust documents twice, slowly, the way I read a contract when I am the one who will have to defend it later. Priscilla was the sole trustee, Gwen was the second signatory, and the beneficiary language was a fog of phrases about the educational betterment of the Rourke family line, which sounds like something until you notice what it does not contain. There are no children named in this trust, Kastner said. Not Owen, not Etta, not anyone under the age of 40. It is a trust for the education of a family in the abstract, with no actual students in it, controlled entirely by your mother-in-law, with your sister-in-law as backup. She let that sit. A college fund with no child's name on it is not a college fund. It is a bucket with a lid, and she is the one holding the lid, and she can lift it whenever she likes and for whatever she calls education. Why would he do this? I said. I was not really asking her. I was asking the ceiling the way you do. I stopped asking why years ago, Kastner said, not unkindly. But if you want my honest guess, he did not experience it as stealing. He experienced it as moving money from an account he could not touch into a structure his mother could. In his mind, that is still family money doing family things, just with better adult supervision, meaning hers. That is the story they are going to tell in that courtroom. They will not say we took it. They will say we protected it. From you. Get ready to hear it said with a straight face, because they believe it. The discovery gave us the texts, and that is the thing people always forget in the moment they are being clever. They text, they put it in writing on the one device that keeps everything. Neil and his mother had a whole thread, and Kastner slid the printout across the table and put her finger on 2 lines, one after the other, like a person laying down cards. Neil, in January, to Priscilla. She's overseas, she'll never notice till it clears. Priscilla, the same night, back to him. Sign it the way she loops the R no one checks. I read them 4 or 5 times. I was not angry, exactly. Anger's hot, and this was cold. It was the specific cold of learning that the 2 people who were supposed to protect my children had sat in a room on a January evening and studied the way I write my own name, so they could copy it well enough to move my kid's future somewhere I could not reach. Sign it the way she loops the R. They had practiced my hand. Someone had sat with a pen and looped my R until it was good enough. They were right that no one usually checks, I said. They were, Kastner agreed. Most of the time, no one does. That is the quiet math these things run on. The odds that anyone looks are very low, so people who would never rob a store will forge a form, because a form feels like paperwork and not like a crime. But someone had checked. In February, a woman 2 towns over had looked at a signature that did not match a card, and she had stopped a wire, and she had filed a report, and she had waited for 6 months for someone to walk through her door. They had been wrong about which no one. Her name was Yvette Cardona. The guarantor records came in next, and they closed the last door the other side might have tried to slip out of. Kastner had subpoenaed the log from the bank branch where the medallion stamp had been obtained. The log showed the date, the 11th of February, and it showed who had presented the form and signed in front of the guarantor. It was Neil. He had walked into a bank branch on a Tuesday morning with a form that already had my forged signature on it, and he had signed a second attestation in front of a bank officer in his own name, vouching that he had the authority to move the funds. The guarantor had stamped it in good faith. That officer, when Kastner reached her, was horrified and cooperative and precise, because a guarantor who has been fooled has every reason in the world to help you prove she was fooled. He told me it was a routine family rollover, she said in her statement. He said his wife was deployed and had asked him to handle it. I had no way to know the underlying signature was not genuine. Every sentence of that statement was another nail. He had not only forged my hand, he had stood at a counter and told a stranger that I had asked him to do it. He had put words in my mouth from 8,000 miles away. This is the part juries and judges never forgive, Kastner said, tapping the guarantor's statement. Not the theft. The lie told to a third party to make the theft look ordinary. Once you drag an innocent bystander into it, once you make a bank officer an unwitting part of your forgery, you stop looking like a desperate man and start looking like a calculating one. Judges can feel sorry for desperate. They have no patience for calculating. There was one more moment in the dig that I have never told anyone, and I will tell you because it is the moment I am proudest of, and it looked like nothing. Priscilla called me. In the middle of all of it, she called me, warm as a summer porch, and she said she wanted to smooth things over for the children's sake, and she started very gently to fish. She wanted to know what I knew. She wanted to know if I had talked to anyone official, in exactly those words. I understood in 1 second what the call was. She was doing reconnaissance. Old me would have unloaded, would have told her everything I had out of the pure need to make her feel the weight of what she had done. New me, the me that a career of holding sensitive information had built, said almost nothing. I said, I appreciate you calling, Priscilla. My lawyer is handling everything now, so anything you need to say should go through her. Pleasant. Final. It gave her nothing. I did not record the call because I did not need to, and because I did not want to become someone who records the people they used to love. But I hung up, and I sat very still, and I thought, you taught me to be quiet, and now you are going to find out how quiet I can be. There was a night in the middle of all of it when the stake stopped being a number and became my son. Owen came into the kitchen while I was working, and he leaned on the counter the way he does when something is on his mind. And he said, out of nowhere, "Marcus in my class says his family is saving up so he can go to college. Are we saving up?" He was not worried. He was just 8 and curious. But it went through me like cold water, because the honest answer, that week, was that the money he was asking about was frozen in a bank 2 towns over with a forged version of my name on it, and that his father and his grandmother had tried to move his future into a bucket with a lid. I could not say any of that to an 8-year-old, so I crouched down to his level, and I put my hands on his shoulders, and I said, "We are saving up. It is already saved. It has been saved since the day you were born, and I am making sure it stays exactly where it belongs." He said, "Okay." The way kids do, already halfway to the refrigerator, the question answered, the world put back in order, and I stayed crouched on the kitchen floor for a second longer than I needed to, and I promised him something he did not know he was being promised. I was going to make that sentence true, no matter what it took, so that no one could ever loop my name and take it from him again. The other side did not fold when the trust documents came out. I want to be honest about that, because the story is easier if the villains crumble the moment they are caught, and they do not the practiced ones. Priscilla did not crumble. She recalibrated, which is a different and more dangerous thing. We had a pre-hearing conference, all of us in a room with a long table, lawyers on both sides, Neil looking at his hands, Priscilla sitting very straight in a very good coat, Gwen beside her looking like a person who had realized, too late, exactly what she had signed. Kastner entered Yvette Cardona's affidavit into the record and read the key part aloud, the part about the signature, failing verification, and the wire being frozen, and I watched the opposing lawyer lean toward Priscilla and say something very quietly. I could not hear all of it. I heard the last 3 words. "Say nothing else." Priscilla was not built to say nothing. She had spent 63 years being the most certain person in every room she entered, and certainty like that does not come with a mute button. It was always meant for the children's future, she said, to the table, to the record, to the version of the story she had already decided was true and was going to keep true by sheer force of repetition. I thought about the trust with no children's names in it, the children whose futures were so precious to her that she had carefully removed their names from the account that was supposed to hold them. I did not say any of that out loud. Kastner had told me the most powerful thing I could do in that room was to be quiet and let the paper talk, and the paper was very loud and getting louder. Kastner had also brought a forensic document examiner into the file, a quiet man who had spent 30 years looking at the difference between a signature and a drawing of one. His report was 2 pages, and it was devastating in the flat way that expert reports are devastating. A genuine signature, he wrote, is written at speed, without hesitation, the hand moving from muscle memory. A forged one is drawn slowly with tiny stops where the forger checks the model, and those stops leave marks, little tremors and pen lifts and places where the ink pools because the pen paused. He had found 11 such hesitation marks in the February signature, 11 places where a hand had stopped to check how I loop my own R. In my real signature, the one on the 8-year-old card, there were none, because I have never once had to think about how to write my own name. The February signature, his report concluded, was produced by a writer copying a model, not by the account owner signing from habit. 11 hesitation marks. I kept coming back to that number. 11 months I was gone, and 11 small places where someone's hand had trembled writing my name. There was a moment with Gwen. It was small, and I almost missed it. Kastner asked mildly for the record whether Gwen understood what she had signed when she became the second signatory of the trust. Gwen opened her mouth, and Priscilla put a hand flat on the table, not touching her, just near her, and Gwen closed her mouth again. But I saw it. The signatory was starting to understand that she was a name on a document too, and that names on documents are exactly what this whole thing was made of. Kastner laid the 2 signatures side by side on the table, the real one from 8 years ago and the February forgery, blown up large enough to read from across the room. "Same name," she said. 2 different hands. She let a full beat pass. And one of them was in Kuwait. That was the first time I saw something move across Neil's face that was not patience. Not guilt exactly. Calculation. The look of a man who has just understood that the story he told himself, the one where this was all reasonable and family and fine, does not survive contact with a government seal and a signature card. Evidence is a strange kind of mercy. It does not scream. It does not need to. It just sits on the table being true over and over until the noise around it runs out of air. The hearing was set for a Tuesday. For the first time in weeks, I slept the whole night before. I need to explain how a hearing like this actually works, because television has ruined everyone's expectations, mine included. There is no gasp from a gallery. There is no lawyer pacing and pointing and shouting objection. There is a small room and a tired judge and a very great deal of paper, and the whole thing turns on whether the paper says what you claim it says. It is the least dramatic setting imaginable for the most important morning of your life, and that is exactly why it works. Drama can be doubted. Paper cannot. Judge Eleanor Quill was 57 and had the manner of a person who has heard every excuse the human animal can produce and has developed a very fine ear for the shape of a lie. She read the filings before she ever looked up. When she did look up, she looked at the documents first and the people second, which told me she was going to be fair because the documents were on my side. Kastner called Yvette Cardona first. She was exactly the same on the stand as she had been in that small office, calm and specific. A person who deals in facts because facts are the only things she is paid to have opinions about. Explain the flag, Kastner said. A distribution of this size triggers an automatic signature review against the account's original card, Cardona said. We compare the signature on the distribution form to the card taken when the account was opened. On the 11th of February, this distribution failed that review. It did not fail marginally. The instruction also directed the funds to a newly created outside account, which is a second independent review trigger. I froze the outbound wire and filed a suspicious activity report the same day. And the money? Has been frozen and intact since the 11th of February. $46,000. Never reached the destination account. Not $1 of it moved. In your professional judgment, was the signature on the February distribution form written by the same person who signed the original account card? No, Cardona said. It was not. In my professional judgment, it was a deliberate imitation. Whoever wrote it was working from a model. You can see the effort in it. That is not a natural signature. It is a copied one. The opposing lawyer tried a little on cross. He asked whether signatures do not naturally change over 8 years. Cardona agreed that they do. He asked whether a person under stress might sign differently. Cardona agreed that they might. Then he sat down, because there was nowhere else to go and because Cardona had already said the sentence that mattered, which was that this was not a signature that had drifted over time. It was a signature that had been drawn. Then Kastner entered my orders. Certified, sealed, from the command, with the movement manifest attached. She handed a copy to the judge and read the relevant line, the one that put my body in Kuwait on the 11th of February, 8,000 miles from any notary's desk. She entered Lieutenant Colonel Thibault's letter as well, and she read one line from it, only one, because Kastner understood that a single line lands harder than a page. The line was, "In 14 years, I have never known Major Rourke to sign anything she had not read twice, and she cannot sign what she is not on the same continent to see." Then Kastner set the manifest next to the forged form so the two dates sat side by side, the seal and the forgery, and she did not say anything clever about it, because it did not need anything. Judge Quill looked at the two documents for a long moment. Then she picked up the text printout, the one from Discovery, and she read it into the record herself, in a flat, careful voice that somehow made it worse than any shouting could have. "She's overseas. She'll never notice till it clears," the judge read. She looked over the top of the page. "Whose phone is this, Mr. Rourke?" Neil's lawyer started to speak. The judge lifted one finger, not even her whole hand, just the finger, and he stopped. "I asked Mr. Rourke," she said. Neil said it was his phone. He said it very quietly. In a room that small, quiet carries better than anything. Then Judge Quill read the second line. "Sign it the way she loops the R." She set the page down. She looked at Priscilla for the first time. "And this number," she said, naming it, "the sender of this message. Whose is that?" Priscilla's lawyer answered for her this time, because Priscilla, at last, had learned to say nothing, 6 months and $46,000 too late. There was one more witness, and it was the one I had not seen coming, though Kastner had. She called Gwen, not to attack her, to let her choose, in the open, which side of the paper she was on. Kastner asked her 3 simple questions. Did she open the trust? Yes. Did she read it before she signed? There was a long pause, and I watched Gwen's whole life pass behind her eyes, 34 years of signing what her mother put in front of her, and she said very quietly, "No. My mother told me it was to help the kids. I did not read it. Did she know when she signed that the money coming in was Delia's children's college fund? Moved without Delia's knowledge." And Gwen looked at her mother, and then, for the first time I had ever seen, she looked away from her mother, and she said, "I do now." It was not a confession. It was smaller and sadder than that. It was a woman finally admitting, in a room with a stenographer, that she had spent her whole life being a signature on someone else's documents, and that it had finally cost her something she could not sign away. I did not feel triumphant watching it. I felt like I was watching a version of a trap I had almost fallen into myself, the trap of letting the loudest person in the family decide what was true. I had one moment on the stand myself. Kastner asked me what I wanted the court to do, and I had rehearsed a dozen answers over the weeks, and I used none of them. I said, I want the money put back where a child's name is on it, and I want it put somewhere that no adult in my family can ever move it again, including me, so that no one can ever stand where I am standing again. I said, this was never about winning. It was about making sure no one can sign my children away while I am gone doing my job. I kept my voice level. The Army taught me that. It is the one gift from all those years away that I will never give back. Judge Quill did not deliberate long. She ordered the $46,000 restored to the college savings plan in full. She ordered the account retitled so that the funds were held for the benefit of Owen and Etta by name in a custodial form that placed them, in her words, beyond the reach of every adult in this room. She found that the distribution had been executed by means of a forged instrument and a falsely obtained signature guarantee, and she referred that finding to the district attorney for review. She dissolved the Rourke Family Education Trust as a vehicle created to receive misappropriated funds, and she noted for the record that its structure was designed to exclude the very children it claimed to benefit. When it was over, Neil did not look at me. He looked at his mother, and she was already gathering her coat, already turning, already gone. That was the thing I carried out of that courtroom, not triumph, the image of a man looking to his mother for what to do next, and his mother not being there anymore because she had used up the last of him and had nothing left to spend. The referral to the district attorney gave me a choice I had not expected to have, and it turned out to be the hardest part of the whole thing. Harder than the empty account, harder than the stand. The prosecutor was willing to go hard. Forgery of a financial instrument and a fraudulently obtained medallion guarantee are not small things. And she laid out, plainly, sitting across from me with a folder she did not need to open, what she could pursue and what it might cost Neil and cost Priscilla, whose fingerprints, in the form of that one text, were now all over the record. She was not bloodthirsty. She was simply offering me the maximum, the way you offer a person a tool, and letting me decide whether to pick it up. I sat in Kastner's office and turned it over for a long time. You can bury him, Kastner said. She was not encouraging me. She was telling me the truth about the options, which was her job. After what they did, most people in that chair would, and no one would blame them. The record is right there. You would win. I thought about Owen at the bottom of the jet bridge, running the way children run when they have been holding still too long. I thought about the specific fact, the one I could not think my way around no matter how I turned it, that my son loves a father who did an unforgivable thing, and that a day will come, years from now, when Owen will be standing outside a school and will look up and will want the person walking toward him to be his dad. I need him able to pick his son up from school someday, I said finally. I do not need him in a cell to know I was right. I already know I was right. The paper knows it. Restitution in full, and supervised contact, and a permanent order that keeps that money untouchable. That is what I want. There is a version of you, Kastner said carefully, that regrets this in 10 years. That sees him at a graduation, comfortable and unbothered, and wishes she had let the prosecutor bury him when she had the chance. I have to ask you to look at that version before you decide. I did look at her. I sat with the woman I might be in 10 years, resentful at a folding chair in a school gymnasium, and then I looked at the other version, the one who spent the next 10 years feeding a hatred every single day to keep it strong enough to matter, and I knew which of those two women I actually wanted to become. I have thought about her, I said. The one who regrets it, and I would rather be her, once, at a graduation, than be the other one every morning for a decade. Hatred is a fun too. It compounds. I have watched what it did to Priscilla. spending down her own children to feel powerful, and I am not going to open that account. Kastner nodded slowly. For his sake? No, I said. For Owen's, and a little for mine. Because I had learned something in that whole ugly season, and it was this. Forgiveness was not letting Neil off. Forgiveness was refusing to let him make me smaller than I was. Vengeance would have kept him living in my head, rent-free, for the rest of my life, and I had already given the Rourkes 11 months and a whole marriage and a great deal of sleep. I was not going to hand them the rest of my years, too, in the form of a grudge I would have to feed every single day. There was a porch conversation near the end, because there always is. Neil came to talk, and I let him, on the front step, in the daylight, where nothing could pretend to be private. He apologized badly. I have noticed that people who do large wrongs apologize small, as if the size of the sorry could shrink the size of the thing. My mother said it was the smart move, he said. She said you would never even notice. She said by the time you did, it would be normal, and you would just accept it, because you always accept things eventually. She was wrong about that, I said. I see that now, he said, and he almost sounded surprised, as if the wrongness of his mother were brand new information and not the oldest fact in his life. I looked at him for a while. I was not angry anymore. That was the strange part. I was just tired in a clean way, the way you are tired after the work is finally done and the tools are put away. You had a wife who counts money for the United States Army, I said. You had a person who could have looked at any worry you had about that fund and fixed it in an afternoon. If you were scared about the money, you could have just asked me. That is the part I cannot get past. Not that you took it, that you had me and you chose her and you never even asked. He did not have anything to say to that. There was nothing to say. He went down the steps and got in his car, and I watched him back out of the driveway of the house I had trusted him to keep, and I did not feel victorious. I felt like a person setting down something very heavy that she had been carrying so long, she had forgotten it had a weight. I got the fun back. I want to be honest that I did not get everything back. I did not get the family I thought I was flying home to that August. My children are going to grow up with a father on the far side of a courtroom order and a grandmother behind a boundary they did not choose and do not fully understand. Owen still asks about Grandma sometimes, and I have to answer in a way that is true without being a weapon, which is one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. Harder than the deployment, harder than the stand. That is the cost of the win, and I will not pretend there was no cost, because that would be its own kind of lie, and I was done with lies, including the comfortable ones. I let myself grieve the marriage I would have kept if he had been a different man. I set the boundary, and I kept it, on the hard days and the soft ones. That was the whole victory. It did not feel like a parade. It felt like closing a door quietly and locking it and checking the lock once and then going to bed. It is spring now, and I want to leave you in the kitchen, because that is where the story actually ends. Not in the courtroom. Courtrooms are where things are decided. Kitchens are where they are lived. There is a letter on the table from the plan administrator. It confirms the retitling. The $46,000 is whole again, every dollar of it, and it is held now for the benefit of 2 specific children in a custodial form that a court would have to unwind, which means the world would have to end before anyone in my family could reach it. Owen's name is on it. Etta's name is on it. Neither of them is mine, and that is exactly how I wanted it. I am not the owner anymore. I am just the one who made sure. I made the selection list this year. My name is on a different piece of paper now, a promotion list, the kind of document I spent a whole career keeping honest for other people. It felt good in a quiet way. It felt like the institution that took 11 months from my kids, also, in the end, handed me the exact tools I needed to get their future back. A career of paper had taught me the one thing that saved us. The record does not lie, if you keep it, and if you are brave enough to go and read it. Yvette Cardona wrote to me once, after it was all over, a short and careful note that stayed inside the lines of what a person in her job is allowed to say. She wrote that in 19 years of flagging accounts, most of her freezes end the same way, with the money quietly returned to whoever moved it because no one ever comes to ask. She wrote that mine was one of a handful she could remember where the person on the other end of the frozen wire walked in, sat down, and turned out to be exactly who the account said she was. She wrote, "You did the hard, boring thing. You kept the record and you asked the question. I wish more people did." I have that note in a drawer. On the days it feels like all I did was survive something ugly, I take it out and read it, because it reminds me that surviving it was not passive. I made 100 small choices to stay calm and keep the paper, and every one of them was a choice I could have failed, and did not. Etta was doing her homework at the table, the way she does now, sitting close to me, checking every few minutes that I have not evaporated, our old private code. She saw me reading the letter, and she asked the question children ask when they can tell something matters and do not yet know why. "Is it really our money, Mom?" she said. "It is really your money," I told her. "Yours and your brother's, and nobody can ever take it out again. Not your dad, not your grandmother, not even me. I made sure. That was the whole point." She nodded, satisfied in the way 6-year-olds are satisfied, and went back to her worksheet. And Owen came in from the other room, looking for a snack. 8 going on 9 now, taller again. And I sat there with the letter between my hands, and let myself feel, for 1 full minute, the thing I had not let myself feel in the courtroom, which was relief. Just relief. Clean and complete. If my story has taught you anything, I hope it is this. The people who take from you are counting on you being too tired, too far away, or too kind to check. They are running the quiet math that says no one ever looks. Check anyway. Keep the record. The truth does not need you to be loud. It needs you to be patient and to keep the paper and to walk into the small office at the back of the bank and ask the right question, even when your hands are calm and your heart is not. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who has been made to feel small in their own family. Someone who is far from home right now and trusting other people to do the right thing while they are gone. In the comments, tell me about a time you kept the record when it would have been easier to look away, or a time someone simply believed you when the paper was all you had. I read them, everyone, and they matter to me more than I can say. And if you want more stories about courage and justice and the quiet kind of hope that does not shout but does not break either, please subscribe and stay with us. Thank you for being here and for listening all the way to the end. It means everything. The end.